Um, guys, y'all couldn't hear me all that time? Can someone I just saw Jada Wakanda ping me. Could y'all not hear me all that time? Was I muted all that time,
Yes,
Jay?
ma'am. And I love you so much, and I could tell because you hate being late.
I was in the
I know
groove.
you were.
I was
I
in the
felt it in
groove.
my shananas that you was talking and
See,
giving us
I
everything.
was in a groove. I was going through my notes. I got all the way into a certain point. But you know what? Hey, everybody. Thank you for sticking here, even though y'all couldn't hear me. That is so dope. And I never did that before, but here we go. You want to join the conversation? Please raise your hand. We're here talking about Dream On because this is a documentary that introduced me to women's basketball and these players. This is where I was introduced to Lisa Leslie, to Dawn Staley, at a time where I needed a positive sign. I lost my mom in 95. I was a freshman in college, and I just was looking for a positive sign of some women, making it happen despite the odds, especially from coming from the inner city and coming from challenging surroundings. And I was basically on my own, first generation college student without either her mother or father. So these women to me were they were a sign of young women going for what their goals were. And they were a sign, okay, women's basketball, there wasn't even a league over here yet. All we had is college. And I was just excited. And in 2016, I was a sophomore when the Olympics came on, but they were promoted that year. And I knew Rebecca Lobo's name and I knew Cheryl Swoop's name, but I was introduced to Dawn Staley. I was introduced to a lot of the names on this list, like Jennifer Azzi and Teresa Edwards, Ruthie Bolton, through the Olympics. And it pretty much changed me. Like these women, I could honestly say, set the groundwork for me going for my goals and doing what I needed to do. And I don't play basketball, it was just in life. And so that's what these women mean to me. The introduction of the WNBA, was a powerful thing for me at the time. And Dawn Staley specifically because she was from North Philly. She was from the projects, and for me, it was like, wow, she could be from the projects and make it to the Olympic team. That spoke volumes to me of who or what I could become. So that is why Dream On for me, like as a member of the Hoopstresses, and I think Sabria and I thank Siobhan for being here, or as I like to call her, Gray Matter. Because that's the name that's her handle. But I just thank y'all for being here. But this is a documentary that was this powerful for me. I watched it like 3 times already. And I just loved it from beginning to end, and getting to know the stories, especially Ruthie's story, um, and and just and just getting to know these ladies in the process. Um, and it was interesting finding out just the background. Just as a quick recap, the 1992 Women's Olympic team was pretty much forgotten in the basketball world because of the men's dream team. It was like the women's team really didn't have the focus that was necessary. They ended up winning the bronze medal in that Olympics, and then they won the bronze medal again in '94, and that was the team that Lisa Leslie and Dawn Staley were on, but they won the bronze. And in 19 for the '96 Olympics, especially since it was home, the NBA got involved with USA Basketball, and they wanted to form a team that would be together for the full year because that's what was happening with the women's leagues around the world. They were together for the full year and get them to bond and get them to work together. And the stipulations, though, is that it was a $50,000 stipend, which means the women who were playing overseas, like players like Chris, players had to give up. These players are playing overseas, and they had to give up $300,000 or more, depending on where they were playing, to accept this $50,000 to sacrifice. And the way Lisa Leslie explained it, this was a sacrifice for the future of women's basketball in this country. It was a sacrifice. They knew it was a sacrifice, and so the women that made the team, this is a humongous sacrifice. This was a humongous. Think about you, like you had a dream for something, happening. Ultimate. There was no league in this country, but say like for whatever it is you doing, it wasn't something you could do here, and you had to sacrifice for a year to kind of make it a reality for the future. That's what these women were being asked to do, and to take a $250,000 pay cut. Like, think about that for a second. And then, you had Tara Vanderveer, who gave up her program at Stanford for a year. Like, so it's kind of crazy, like when you think back on what they were being asked to do and living in the circumstances. We'll get to the travel um, conflicts, a little later, but Lisa, Dawn, and Jennifer Azzi were each cut for the 92 team, and they were added to the national team for this Olympics. But one of the controversies that everyone spoke about was that with Rebecca Lobo being on the team, and the whole UConn craze was starting to sweep the country. Rebecca Lobo being like that golden girl that was getting all the attention. Like Lisa Leslie pretty much called her the Kristen Leitner of the women's team. Um, and Dawn Staley and others, like really Cheryl Swoops was like, yeah, why was she here? Like, and even Rebecca Lobo said she wasn't one of the top players in the country at that time. Like, she looked at some of these women, she had their posters on her wall. Like, she looked up to these players, yet she was here. And there was a fear, she wasn't seen as being equal to them. And even Tara Vanderveer, was very blunt and very direct that she didn't think that Rebecca Lobo belonged there, and even said she was there for marketing purposes. So this was setting the stage on what, she was going to be dealing with for some time until they had some cohesion on the team. Um, Anything you want to add while I continue, Jack?
No. You're love you too, baby. Um, nah, I'm just listening while I'm cooking ramen. Um, and I'm enjoying this because like I'm younger than you, and I remember that tour and everything. But to hear it from your perspective or any of the women in here's perspective, is just dope to me. So I'm just listening, soaking it all in. Because I knew who the players were because I started following UT women's program. So Shamika Holtzclaw and that whole crew, like Summit's first. I'm not gonna say Summit's first good team, but I'll say Summit's first national team that I was aware of. So I was kind of familiar with the college scene, and like you said, there was no league. But I thought it was dope because they was on Martin. They had national TV commercials. They was and so I remember that, and I remember watching them hoop, and I was like, this is cool. Like they can really hoop.
They can really hoop. And what I also thought was dope at back in the day was when Cheryl Swoops, she dominated the women's national championship in '93, and then when Nike, created the shoe, and she had the the first shoe, it brought her to tears talking about it, and with Michael Jordan inviting her to work his camp, and just what that meant to her, and him saying to her he saw her play, and getting to play him, was an amazing experience for her because that was her favorite player. In fact, in the first episode, when they were trying to compare her to somebody, they were trying to compare her to Reggie Miller, and she was insulted. Now, Reggie Miller is a Hall of Famer. He's, considered, one of the greatest shooters, and he's a Hall of Famer. But she was offended because it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm the female Jordan, kind of thought. But we already talked about the Rebecca Lobo being like that, especially at the time. Remember when, the team was being formed, and like in all of this, you had the NHL lockout going on. So women's basketball, took more of a center stage. So Rebecca Lobo was getting a lot in UConn, was ascending in the national, public with women's basketball at that time. And Rebecca Lobo was everywhere. And Gino even admitted, like, if it was some publicity that was going on, they threw Rebecca out there. Like, and she admitted she fit the image that they wanted to project. She knew she did fit that image that they were trying to project. And so that added to like the stigma that she was here for marketing purposes. And it's that was pretty. It was interesting how that was framed, but everybody agreed that it was kind of a. Um, it was the feeling of, a lot of folks there. Tara even mentioned that, to some media that she wouldn't be getting a lot of playing time when they played in Connecticut. And Gino felt that it was kind of, like, like I get the feeling that Gino felt like she could have started, or, could have been more of a factor, but Tara was figuring out starting lineups. And like that wasn't the priority. Like she wasn't a starter, and that's that. Like she was so like direct and blunt that it was like I never created a lineup based on where a player was from. Like that's not why we're here. We're here to win. So it was interesting, like looking at things, looking at what Rebecca Lobo was going through. But it's like at that time, people really didn't have sympathy for her. Like, look, you're on the team. Like, you're here. I mean, but Tara Vanderveer, like her reputation was that she was with the team. They called her Lucy for Lucifer. Like that was how they saw her. And I thought that was hilarious. But Tara even said, "Look, I'm not here to be your friend." So that was funny too to me. Like like thinking about these women are been playing all their lives, but they get this coach that Dawn Staley, who's a coach now, like one of the top coaches, called her Lucifer. But she ended up admitting later that she knew she wasn't here to be liked. She said, "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to win." And her being the way she was actually helped unite the team though, because they became more cohesive as a team, like proving that they can stand up to Tara Vanderveer, like in what she was putting in through. Like they didn't have days off. They talked about how they would think that a day off would be coming up, and it wasn't. And how they did it was, okay, you'll get 24 hours off. So say if it's 3 o'clock now, practice is over, you got 24 hours off. So the next you were expected to be there in 24 hours. So say if it's 3 o'clock now, like you get 24 hours off. That's your day. That's not really getting a day off. Like, but that's how they explained it to them, which thinking about it, that's crazy. But like the first episode was really taking us through the team basically being exhausted. They were playing. They were playing. They started playing games. Like they're on a tour. They did it. They had my niece is in the background and she's playing Roblox with her friends. So you may hear her in the background, and she's having a good time. But anyway, the team was starting to play some games during their tour. They were playing colleges around the country, and they were undefeated at the time, but they were just starting to play games. And so we go into the next episode, because first episode was really setting up, what they were dealing with, and then the second episode is where we found out more of the story. We found out about Nikki McRae being proposed to by her husband. We found out about Ruthie Bolton's story of her domestic abuse, which was it just touched me. You know, like she was going through some horrific, living under horrific conditions, devastating domestic abuse, and she said the team pretty much saved her and really was her light and really gave her what she needed. I mean, they were living together, they sacrificed their lives for a year, but for her, it was it was a relief for her, and it gave her something to focus on and gave her hope. And the women, you know, she said she couldn't even tell them, but they meant so much to her because they unknowingly were helping her during that time. And just think about how powerful that is. You know, you have women fighting and being inspirations around the country for people, but you have one of those women suffering crippling domestic abuse. And I can't imagine going through something so terrible. Um, and then you had Tara Vanderveer while all of this is going on, and Rebecca Lobo, um, you know, didn't feel any connection with her or the team. But there was a USA Today article where Tara Vanderveer is basically didn't think said basically said to the interviewer she didn't think Rebecca Lobo belonged on the team, and to the media and to the team, and also Nikki McCrae's name was mentioned in this article, and you would it bonded the team. They, Teresa Edwards called the team only players only meeting. Like, look, we need to band together. If anybody can kick off this team, we'll all leave. Like, we need to be a team. Hold on for a second. Okay, I'm back. And this bonded the team, and for the first time, Rebecca Lobo felt like she had some support. Gino said that this was a motivational tool, but the team members didn't agree. Like, why would you do this in public? Like, why state this? Why even do this? Um, but right, and then the travel challenges. Now you think about the WNBA today and the travel challenges that they face today between planes and some of these airports, and some of these hotels that they face and they deal with on a regular basis. Well, right before the league, they had travel challenges. They were traveling commercial like they do now. Um, but some of their hotels are terrible. Like, some of them saw rats in their hotel rooms. They were sharing rooms, which to them was outrageous. But the NBA, they one of the repetitive things they kept saying is, well, basically they felt like that was the best they could do at the time. That was the budget. But the men's team weren't sharing, like, so just the amount of what they were dealing with was insane. And I think one of the constraints was the fact that this was a full year tour and program, whereas before the women's, they would bring them together like for a few months or maybe a few weeks before the Olympics. This time they were paying for all of their hotels, all of the flights. They were paying for everything for a year. The NBA was the stopgap. They were filling the gap that the USA uh, like the Olympic Committee wasn't paying for. And so they dealt with these travel challenges, which was horrific. Some of their traveling was just, when you think about now, is it much different? Like decades later, they're still dealing with the same they're still dealing with travel challenges. I don't know about the rats in the hotel rooms. I don't think they're sharing, but they still traveling commercial. They still dealing with those commercial flight issues. I just thought it was interesting how you look at before the league started, they had these travel challenges, poor conditions, but it was seen as a sacrifice to get a league off the ground, to prove that there was a league, and that there was an audience, and that they can deal with it and deal with these challenges. But we really need the WNBA to evolve. And I see Sabria, and I'm thinking, yes, the CBA that they signed, CBA, but I, like this is the one area that I feel like we need the WNBA and the owners to, figure out a solution that will help these players, get to their games and have a more fair treatment between them, and like that they can at least get to their games on time and be treated as professionals instead of um, traveling commercial the way they are, where they can get their flights canceled and then they're sleeping in the airport, like some of the Los Angeles Sparks had to do this week. So travel challenges aren't new. They've been with the W even before it was announced that there was going to be a W. So, when you think about that, that's daunting. We're talking WNBA was announced that will be a league April, 1995 or 96. We're in 2022 and they're still dealing with travel problems. Um, but one of the things they also talked about was Russia gave them their biggest challenge, and that was a game they almost lost. They also almost lost a game against Texas Tech. Um, but the game against Russia was brutal. They were a physical team, and this was the first time some of them were facing such, like international talent of this level. They, like these were the type of teams they were going to face in the Olympics, and it was a big challenge for them. I see you, Gabby. It was a big challenge for them. Go ahead, Jay, and then Gabby.
Nah, I was just gonna say that that whole program, that whole experiment, they basically were the guinea pigs, and a lot of the lessons that they learned, as far as marketing and travel and all that stuff, kind of fed into the '99 Women's World Cup and how that team was marketed. And it's a crying shame that the W is still dealing with some issues almost 30 years later. That's crazy. I never. This is my first time hearing about the travel issues, to be honest with you. And I'm just shocked. But I was just thinking about how, you know everything about this process was new and experimental, and you really haven't seen anything like it since. Like I would love for a WNBA star to pop up on, Abbott Elementary. You know what I mean? And like there's some stuff that was done for that team
Yeah,
that
it really was. Like the tours that they were doing, if they can tour areas that, there's so many other things they could be doing. Bringing games to areas don't have teams. Like there's certain things they could be doing that they just abandoned. I feel like after they launched the league.
oh, absolutely. I mean, but that's all I had.
Gabby, anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I didn't get a chance to watch the documentary, but you were talking about Coach Vanderveer. I have a lot of respect for her. Um, in Rebecca Lobo's place, who was she thinking should have made the team that year? Other than Jennifer Azzi, I don't remember anybody from Stanford, any other person from Stanford on that team. Was she thinking like Val Whiting? And I think it's interesting how sort of like a Yukon bias. I'm old enough to remember around your age. Um, it's interesting that also, in addition to the travel stuff, that the Yukon bias still exists, right? Because one of the Gumake sisters were sort of left off the last Olympic squad and should have clearly been on it in favor of a bunch of Yukon players. You said something about Rebecca Lobo and marketing. Yeah, she was fairly decent, but I don't mean this in a slight, which she wasn't attractive, or what was it was just because of UConn, or yeah.
Well, it was because of UConn, and Rebecca Lobo was heavily marketed at the time. Like in terms of as a college player, she like UConn was ascending, and she was that player that was all over the networks at the time. Like, like, yeah, she was heavily made up, and she said the right things, and she was like a media magnet, at the time. I even remember Rebecca Lobo.
Oh,
And I
yeah, me
wasn't, yeah,
too.
and I'm not even in, like, I was in college at the time, and I remember her, and for me to remember her, and at that time, she had to be everywhere because I wasn't paying attention to women's basketball before, to be honest, before the '96 Olympic team. So, but we being on the East Coast too, that's part of it. Like UConn was, like, in terms of my area, we knew who should, because of the media coverage. But that, in terms of who should have taken her place, they didn't talk about that in the doc. They just thought that, or maybe they did and I missed it. But the main thing that just was repeated was she knew that she wasn't the best player compared to the players that were there, um, and Tara Vanderveer made it clear that she it was like she wasn't welcome there. They felt like they could have had a better player in her place.
Yeah, I remember that time. I'm from the East Coast too, from New York. Definitely understand the Yukon thing with it
Mm-hmm.
being close to headquarters for ESPN. That all
Yep.
makes sense.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Any other questions or comments, feel free to come up. If you saw the doc and you have some perspective, I welcome you. Please raise your hand. And I definitely welcome any input or any questions or any comments. Afterwards, we'll have a reflection period where we'll talk about the reflections of the doc and where we are. But like I said, Russia was their biggest challenge. And one of the things that they noticed is they didn't have a presence, and they didn't have that immovable body inside. They just didn't have it. And which is why Russia, teams that were physical and had those type of players, and or had players with size, they gave them a challenge. I mean, they were still undefeated. They still won the game, but it was a tight game. It was tighter than Tara and the women's team were comfortable with. And this set the stage for the impending addition of Venus Lacey. She was the last player added to the Olympic team, and that will come soon. But the players reflected that, yeah, this is going to be a challenge. It gave them they gave them some adversity in terms of playing, and allowed them to look within themselves a little more. And they had to fight with with Russia, but that gave them a sense of what they were going to face. There was more talk on the horrible, and them sharing. They hated sharing these rooms. They talked about this a few times. It wasn't just talked about once. It was talked about a few times, and Lisa Leslie understood the sacrifice, but she mentioned a few times, that the men didn't have to share, but we were sharing these rooms. Like, them sharing rooms was, yeah. I'm gonna say it again only because they mentioned it like throughout the second episode, and they kept mentioning how adversity was part of the sacrifice. And one of the things also that happened and was taking place is when we look at the W, everyone's free to be who they are, even though there could be some fans, and some marketers, that may not jump on board as fast, or, like with people being more free to be who they are now. Back then, it wasn't. Jennifer Azzi didn't feel comfortable coming out, or um, and none of the players, they were feminine. That basically they were feminized. All of them were feminized because they were selling an image. And the way it was explained is, look, we are representing. We were basically a product. So when they were in public, they were, like, if they weren't playing, they're pretty much made up, and they pretty much had to look the part. And one of the things, and I will say, one of the things I miss the presence of somebody like a Robin Roberts, who her reporting back in the day was dope. She reported on everything from women. She was all over the place, but she did great work in terms of reporting on ESPN. And we don't have investigative journalism or somebody on her caliber reporter. I feel like being so interested in the league, giving comprehensive stories. Um, I feel like she was missed. She's missed in today because she covered that team. I remember watching her covering the men and women. Whoever she covered, it was thorough. So I really miss that piece of it. But um, Dawn basically had to go back from with appearances. Dawn had to remove her jewelry. Others had to present a specific appearance. Wearing dresses and like being like, really just outside of really their comfort zone, wearing makeup. And Lisa Leslie was more than willing to do it because she saw it as an opportunity for representation, an opportunity. This is part of the sacrifice. Like, and Robin Roberts says she appreciated that they saw the bigger picture. That this was about getting a league. And so that part of it was like, man, they had to sacrifice part of themselves or what was inside for the league to come about. This team brought out people all over the world. In the U.S., they had some great attendance, enough attendance and enough buzz in their marketing, and the buzz they were getting pretty much sent the message that a league was viable in this country. And Their sacrifices were worth it. They talk about the other leagues, which like the Redheads, All American Redheads, the Women's Basketball League, which WBL. I wish the WBL was around longer. That's one league I wish I would have saw and experienced better. I just didn't know enough about it. And the Liberty Basketball Association was just an embarrassment. They just sexualized their players. It was like, what is this? But David David Stern announced the WNBA April 1996. Um, and the ladies understood even more that the stakes were high and they had to bring home the gold medal. And it ended with talking about Russia. And again, because they played them again and they played even dirtier this time than they did the first time. And they won the game, but they saw even more that like the coaching staff in the USA basketball felt they needed a presence inside. The ladies apparently disagreed because they felt like they should just roll with the team that was there with them, like for that full year. They were together, they dined together, they lived together, they were one, and they were not exactly open to bringing in a new person. But with the challenges they were having with Russia, and they were going to have to face Brazil and some of these other teams that gave U.S. problems at the Olympic level. Venus Lacey was added to the Olympic team, and they needed someone like her that was strong. And some of the team members just reiterated a few times that they didn't feel Venus was needed, but it wasn't clear whether Venus experienced any. They didn't talk about whether Venus experienced any feelings of resentment or anything. She wouldn't remember them because of her accident, and we'll get to that a little later. But it was clear that how they felt about her at first. But she proved to be needed in the Olympics because her presence inside. Some of the players even recognized Venus really helped us in these games, and she helped us here and she helped us there. So she was somebody that added and helped them eventually win the gold medal. It's just that she was that last piece, and they were trying out different players through the year, to fill that last slot. And Venus was the one that eventually ended up winning that slot. But the third episode pretty much went into further marketing, like they covered Sports Illustrated. I remember that. Like for me, I remember the Sports Illustrated cover vividly. That was a big moment. And, like I owned that episode. I owned that. Another thing that was talked about, um, and I was going to get to it in a minute, Virl, but the president supporting these ladies and running with them around the White House. They jogged with the president around the, they were photographed and videoed running with the president, speaking with the president. In addition, Carla McGee story with her being in a horrific car accident and while she was at Tennessee, and she could have died, and it was suggested that she was going to be living in pain for the rest of her life. She ended up returning to Tennessee and getting her starting position back and really fought to get back on the court when she could have died and not played again and could have just, fought to just stay alive. But that strength and that fortitude is what got the president to get Carla McGee to light the Olympic torch. And um, it was interesting because she, I guess Lisa Leslie and Dawn Staley played a lot of practical jokes, like all the time. So she thought it was a practical joke that they got somebody to call the room, act like they were the president or the White House, and she was talking to Bill Clinton. She didn't realize she was really talking to President Bill Clinton. She thought it was a joke, and she was talking to one of their friends, and so she was talking to them like in street language and like not taking it seriously. She didn't realize to the next day when one of the assistant coaches said to her that she belonged in a plane to DC, that she really was talking to the president. So I thought that was hilarious. But she really fought to survive, and for her to be, that's what I mean, these ladies and what they represented, fought to survive to be on that team. So she lit their Olympic torch, and that was another big event that I remember, and the Sports Illustrated cover, and just all the publicity that happened. But um, the opening ceremonies and just how powerful that was to the team. But Tara was concerned about one of them falling because they were rushing them and they all had on heels, and she was like, "What if they sprained an ankle and couldn't play?" All Tara cared about was winning. Like she was like, "What if they couldn't play?" So I just thought that whenever Tara talked, that's what she's going to get. You're going to get the coach talking about, them needing to win because she felt that pressure. She left Stanford for this year, and coached the hell out of these players, and that's all she needed was one of her top players to fall and sprain their ankle. Like it felt like a horror to her that could happen. So what you got from Tara was, I need my players, soak in the moment, but walk slowly. And, so it was, and Teresa Edwards, like I said, she commended Venus Lacey because she realized that her presence was felt and needed on the court. And they were able to pretty much breeze through the Olympics. They did not face Russia in the Olymp. They did not face Russia. Brazil beat Russia, so they were able to, they faced Brazil, but with Venus's help, they were able to. Brazil beat them in the FIBA 90. I think it was 94, and they were able to beat Brazil. Like it was Lisa Leslie did say it was a challenge, but they beat them handedly, and they brought the gold medal back to America. This team was responsible for the WNBA being formed, and so their sacrifice was worth it. And it was interesting that Dawn Staley ended up playing in another women's league the first 2 years before playing in the WNBA. But it was Venus Lacey, unfortunately, had a terrible car accident. She had a two-car collision in 6 months after the Olympics, and she had amnesia after this crash. So there was pieces of her memory she lost, and that includes this Olympic team. So her son helped her through her memory and helped her do clips, from the paper, helped her repiece, and talk about her history. That was really sad that she lost such a big chunk of her life after the accident. And when you saw them at the reunion, which was at the Las Vegas All Star Game, at the WNBA All Star Game last year, they had a reunion and she was there. And with the way Lisa Leslie was like, at the end, I know we weren't there for you for the accident, but she said some kind words. But um, I to me, I felt like a little distance because she wasn't there with that group from the beginning, and like it just felt like they really didn't show that outreach for her like they probably could have. But Venus Lacey, appreciated them saying that, um, and it's just it. I feel for her because she was crying and she just felt like like this is a piece of her life she didn't have, and she just appreciated being there. And a piece of just a giant chunk of her memory is gone. But it was nice to see a lot of the ladies continue in the same path. After even today, some of them are coaches. We know Dawn Staley's a coach, but some of them, like Teresa Edwards, are coaches on the high school level. You have them involved in different aspects of sports or with brands. Like Cheryl Swoops is a product manager for Nike, but she used to coach, but she said she just didn't have the patience. I did other research on Cheryl Swoops. She didn't have the patience to coach long term, so she's a project manager at Nike. I believe Carla McGee is works with Converse, and each of the women just branched. Jennifer Azzi, was one of the first coaches to come out and for college Division I coaches, and she's coaching. But these women made a mark, and their sacrifice during the summer of 1996 brought us a WNBA that we enjoy and we love today. And I love that this documentary is done because it was time for them to be celebrated, for them to be recognized for their sacrifice, for what they did, for winning the first, they was the first of the 7 in a row of the gold medals, and just a blessing. And it's the team that introduced me to the WNBA. I was in love with the WNBA from the beginning of the league with the first teams. It sucks that the Houston Comets, there is this, they're not there. They're not, they made such a mark their first 4 years, the first 4 years of the W. Now there's no trace. And that's insane and crazy. And um, I hate that. But we love the W today. We love the players. And it's this team that brought us that league, that brought us the league that we love today. So that's pretty much Dream On. Any comments or reflections from Dream On that you is available on ESPN 3 episode doc. You can find it on ESPN Plus. The whole thing with no commercials. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's going to be a doc I watch a few more times because of what these particular women mean to me, and how their success influenced me finishing college, and just seeing a positive path that I needed to see at that time, as a young woman, basically orphaned. And these women, I don't know them, never met them, but they helped me through it without even knowing me. So um, that's Dream On. So Jay and Gabby, anything you want to add, or if anyone wants to come to the stage, talk about the relationship to the current W or anything like that, feel free to come to the stage and we could talk about it. Any other insights that you have from the doc, or um, feel free to come up. But yeah, Jay and Gabby, you can go ahead.
Gabby, you can go first.
No, I was just gonna thank you for the recap. I haven't had a chance to watch, but your recap was so comprehensive. I'm still excited to watch. Um, Yeah, I'm just that's all I want to say. I don't want to take up anybody's too much of anybody's time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jay. Anything you, Jay? I implore you, if you haven't watched it, I definitely implore you to give it a watch and give it a listen. And give it a watch because it's great. You know, you see a young Dawn Staley, a young Lisa Leslie. You know, you see these players when Cheryl Swoops. You see these players at young ages fighting. And Ruthie Bolton, this is one thing I meant to say at the end. Ruthie Bolton still works with domestic violence victims. She left her husband in 2002, and she still works with domestic violence victims. Um, it's horrific what she went through during that time. But Jay, anything you want to add?
No, I haven't seen the documentary, but your recap of it was phenomenal. And I just remember that time vividly because I think I was around elementary school age around that time. But it was just like I said, I was into UT women's basketball. I was all into Pat Summit um, and that whole crew, and I just remember because I think that was the first time I ever saw Lisa Leslie, um, who and it was just cool. Like it was, I can't explain it other than saying that it was like watching your favorite food get made in a different way. Like if you like bread and you're used to like rolls and French rolls, it's like watching somebody make a tortilla and then turn it into like a dope taco. You know what I mean? Like that's what it was like being exposed to women's basketball on the Olympic level, because they I appreciated the women's game in that you could see team 5-on-5 basketball being played, and the NBA at that time, was Michael Jordan's domain, and that's and the ISO kind of throw it into your star kind of basketball had kind of taken shape, and so I just remember watching. It was kind of like watching a reunion show of like your favorite show because it's like all the players that I kind of missed watching because they graduated out of college and they were there hooping, kicking butt and taking names in the Olympics. And it was just I like doing this or listening to you talk about it because it brought back a lot of great memories. Because you never know when they would pop up. Like I remember, like getting ready for bed and like uh, Cheryl Swoops was like on, I think it was Jay Leno or David Letterman, and my dad let me stay up and let me watch that interview, and so that's what this documentary is probably going to bring up for me is just a lot of nostalgia and my childhood and falling in love with the W and the origin of it with this Olympic team.
Yeah, like I feel like personally, like a lot of the marketing they did at the time, to expose the league and to promote the league, and like Sabria, my fellow hoopstress, the leader basically of the hoopstress women's core, she has an organization, Grow the Game, and I feel like with the marketing efforts they were doing at the beginning of, and Sabria's in the audience, you can click her profile and you can see how to support Grow the Game. But what the marketing efforts they were doing to grow the game and to build an audience, I feel like they should be doing that. They could be doing that now. And I feel like they abandoned it after they launched the league. And when they did that tour, they went to 60 different, they played 60 games. Some of them international, but most of them were in the States. They were playing colleges all over the country. Like, let's bring that back. Let's go to areas that don't get games. Let's go and let's have that tour again. Let's bring back some of that groundbreaking stuff they were doing, basically grassroots, a lot of stuff on the ground. Let's get our players on some of these nationally syndicated shows. Let's get them talking about the league. Let's be diverse this time with representation. Like everybody isn't like that feminine image that we see out there, like with that cover of the Sports Illustrated they try to put out there. Let's get out there images of who the W are and who they represent, and let's invite people that will love the W. I think what one of the things they talked about in the doc was, them wanting to allure and get men's fans, to support the fans of the men's league and men to, be interested in the W and the players. Let's get people interested in ball, interested in hoop, interested in supporting the players, no matter whether they fem or not, to be fans of the league. But I think they could do a much better job. And when I was looking at this doc and just the marketing, the full court press that was put forth on a limited budget, there's a lot more they can do now. You do have more, like you do have more, you had a lot of support at the launch, but you do have some vendors and you do have some sponsors. Let's come up with some creative campaigns like the Nike campaign when you had Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops, and Dawn Staley, playing male players in the hardwood. And that was a whole campaign. That was a whole commercial. You know what I mean? Maybe not that commercial, but there are some other things you can do to kind of with the sponsors to really help promote the league, in a better way. I honestly feel like they fell down on the job. Get some people that are embedded in the sport, that love the sport and have these ideas, like a Sabria, and Lowe, who has Beyond the Game, and other people that can really help you put that stamp and get out there. I feel like they keep hurting themselves, and like they just introduced the Roku app for the WNB for the League Pass. Like, actually love it. I watched it last night. I was like, if I had this all season, this would have been perfect. Like, perfect. I actually love that they have the Roku. I can just go on there and watch a game. But we're about to go into the playoffs. Like, next season I'll enjoy it, but and I'm sure the price is going to jack up because of that, and they'll probably have a Google Play version or whatever. But I feel like I don't know what it's going to take to shake the table, get some groundbreaking leadership, get some, like I don't know what they need to do, but something needs to happen. Do they have owners that are fully invested in this league, or are they using it as a tax write-off? Like, what is going on? So that's my little hot box of my thoughts on promotion of the W. I feel like, yes, it's been over 25 years now. I feel like some progress is needed. And I feel like in some places they haven't progressed in ways as much as they could have, considering where they started. That's what my takeaway is. Like, you had these women sacrificing. 50,000 was considered a sacrifice. You got players making 70,000 or whatever. Now, this is 25 years later. Sacrifice was 50,000. That was a 50,000 stipend. You have players not making much more than that. You do have the superstars making maybe 200,000, 100, whatever. But I feel like the league itself, there's a lot. We could be further. But that's enough
Yeah.
of my hot box on that.
Oh no, no, I'm gonna be your amen corner because this isn't new Einstein stuff. Like the finals MVP doing the rounds, like going on Jimmy Fallon, going on Jimmy Kimmel, the cup. Like if that trophy wasn't so pathetic, you could take that trophy and tour it through the late night circuit. You know what I'm saying? Like this was the MVP of this game. This is what we're doing. Like this is stuff that the league. Like I would love to see a WNBA player hosts Saturday Night Live. That's one of the only things that'll make me tune into that show. I would love to see a WNBA player, um, you know, just the simple things that the NBA players do to market the game. Because this is like, I hate when people come up with these like cockamamie ideas, like the rims need to be lowered, they need to put trampolines in the floor, all that kind of crazy crap. It's like, no, like put them on TV. It's really that simple. Like, just put them on TV. Like, and they can't even do that, and that's what's frustrating, um, for me as a fan, is that there's no dope Diana Taurasi shoe commercial, and she's been in the league forever. There is no iconic Maya Moore commercial. She's a legend of the game. You know what I'm saying? But when you talk about Anthony Hardaway, there are people who don't know basketball but remember Little Penny and those commercials. There are people who weren't really in the ball, but they remember those Spike Lee, Michael Jordan commercials. It's like simple things like that you're doing already. You're doing it already. Just give women their place that they've earned. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, it's disrespectful at this point.
I agree. And one of the things that, like, I always think about this, Skylar Diggins Smith was the first female player signed by Puma. Um, but she wasn't the first player to get a shoe. That went to Breonna Stewart. And I'm happy Breonna Stewart has her shoe. Deladon has her shoe. Candace Parker has her shoe. But they did give Skylar, her line, um, which is dope. But it would have been nice to see Skylar get her shoe when I think she was due. Um, Asia should have her own shoe. But this is again the marketing they did for Nike did for when Cheryl Swoop was the first with her shoe, and making sure people saw her at the Michael Jordan camp, making sure they promoted that and put her on that level. Even the marketing around back then was better than now. Like I saw Breonna Stewart's commercial last night while watching League Pass, but I don't see women's commercials or promotion the way that it could be, like to get it really out there. Like back then, you saw the Cheryl Swoops, you saw her everywhere. I remember that. So I just feel like we're going backwards, and so that's why I just believe heavily. I know Sabria's like, we stop mentioning my name, supporting organizations like Grow the Game, um, people that are thinking outside the box and doing some other things to help promote women's sports and the women's league. Um, I think it's important because I don't know what the W is doing, but I hope they improve when it comes to the marketing. Maybe get some new brains in there. I don't know, but something needs to we could talk about this all night, and maybe this would be Sabria talks about this and we talk about this in some Hoopsters room. So I'm going in topics that were already discussed, or some of the Hoopsters playback rooms that will be popping up more, especially during the playoffs, led by Sabria. So you'll see those pop up, and follow the Hoopstresses, follow Sabria, follow, um, Miss Gray Matter, because that is her. Follow Robin. She's dope. You want to hear some knowledgeable people talk about the W? Definitely follow those people. Follow myself. You want to hear, some dope things on budgeting or just sneakers or hoop in general. TJ Kiso is a good person to follow. Um, and let's support one another. And you know, I'm of course I'm also a hoopstress. I support the women's game. Love the women's game still. And I also have my this show to rewind. This was our dream on, but next week I'm probably going to talk about New York City Point Gods, which came out on a documentary from Showtime that just was released. I watched that last night. Absolutely loved it. Later this month, I'll be interviewing Jeff Pearlman, who wrote the book Three Ring Circus, on the Kobe Shaq Phil Jackson years, that dynasty. I'll be interviewing him at the end of the month on August 31st at 8 p.m. Talk some Kobe and Shaq Lakers. So that's coming. And I'm scheduling some other things, talking about the American Basketball Association, the Forgotten Association. That's coming also this month. And I'm planning some other special episodes on the rise of the black quarterback, trying to get that author to speak with me. So stay tuned to the Rewind. Got some interesting shows coming up. And check out the Hoopstresses. Follow, follow us. Hoopstresses is a handle. Follow Sabria. Follow Robin. Follow Gray Matter, even though her name is Fawn. But that's you can't see her name, and you will be up on the women's Hoopstresses Women, Hoopstresses W, and there's a men's Hoopstresses that will be on Monday nights. You follow Nat Fluential, and of course Gray Matters also, and myself. I'll be on the men's because yes, I'm a Nets fan. Please take pity on me. But we will be back for the fall. So those are the people to follow. And thank you for coming out. I see 30s here. 30, I thought we were going to be discussing this, not me talking 90% of the time. But I'm glad I had thorough notes. But 30, if you want to find, he publishes a lot of sports and hot topic information on his page, and you can converse with others on those topics on his page. So if you see 30 and Dubs, definitely, he's in the audience. Follow him if you want to just stay abreast of sports business, sports hot topics, anything like that. You can follow his timeline and converse in the comments on those topics. Thanks a lot. See y'all next week for New York City Point Guards. And have a good evening, everyone. I need some outro music. Later.